We are now going to look at prohibitive behaviors, and this is going to be important for you. So again, as we go through this section, you make sure that you understand and you read all parts of that section. If you have any questions, you discuss this with your test coordinator. But we're going to look at prohibitive behaviors. And for the accommodations, this will be on page 50 that we're going to start with, and then on for standard time, this will be on page 43. So go ahead and get your manual, turn to page 50 for accommodations, and then if you are going to be testing standard time, go to page 43. Okay, so if I go to page, I'm going to go ahead and use the accommodations manual. The information for prohibitive behaviors is the same. It's identical for both accommodations and standard time. And the process to completing the irregularity reports is the same in both cases. Okay, so let's go to page 50 in my case. So for your manual, you either go to page 50 or to page 43, depending on your manual. All right, so if I go to page 50, there is a part that talks about prohibited behaviors at the test site. Now, just to remind you, remember for the irregularity report, do not void an answer document for any other reason other than prohibited behavior. So if remember in a previous video we talked about what to do if examinees leave early, what to do if the examinee refuses to continue testing, or asks the answer document not to be scored. These are examples. These are not to be voided. The only situation that you're going to void an answer document is for prohibitive behavior. All right, so that's what this is about. Okay, now let's go back to page 50 in my case. And so on the bottom of page 50, it talks about prohibited behaviors at test site. All right, so the prohibited behaviors below are taken directly from the terms and conditions all examinees agree to when they completed their non-test sections. Okay, what that means is this. Before students take test one, at least one day before, it cannot be done the day of. It has to be done before test day. They receive this. All students should have received this. This was given to every test coordinator to distribute to students when they complete the non-test section of the answer document, meaning this. So this part here, all of this part. Well, not all of it, but there were certain fields, certain blocks that had to be completed. Right. And at the end of test 4, they're going to have to complete this. So as a room supervisor, you need to make sure at the end of test 4, which is science, that they do this part. There's directions where you have to read this to them. All right, so it's important that each student gets this, because at the end of this document, there is, and this is on page, let me get to it real quickly. This is on page 23. On page 23, there's a section called 2019-2020 Terms and Conditions, Testing Rules and Policies for the ACT Test. So they read this, and there's a bunch of information here, and on number 6 is the prohibited behaviors that are listed. There's information about automatic scoring reporting for scholarship purposes, photo submission requirements and registration, admission to test centers, items brought to the test center, etc. Okay, so this is all information that they should read. But again, this needs to be given to all students as they complete the non-test portion of the answer document. Okay, so now let's go back to this. Prohibitive. So again, we just mentioned that prohibitive behaviors below are taken directly from the terms and conditions all examinees agree to when they complete their non-test section. The following behaviors are prohibited. You may be dismissed and or your test may not be scored at ACT's sole discretion if you are found, number one, filling in or altering responses to any multiple choice questions, or continuing to write or alter the essay after a time has been called. Now, in Louisiana, we don't do the essay. This means that you cannot make any changes to a test section outside of the designated time for that section, even to fix a stray mark or accidental keystroke. So there are a few students taking the test online, but almost majority of them, 99%, will be paper. Now, this is a common one. There's always, every testing period, there's always at least one student that will either work ahead, go back and fill in ovals. That's prohibited behavior. Their test is voided, and they cannot do the makeup. But that is something that occurs quite often. Next one. Oh, and that's why it's very important that as room supervisors and monitors that you're constantly monitoring, you're walking around. If students know that you are walking around, for the most part, not always, for the most part, they will not do a prohibited behavior such as this. Then the other one is looking back at a test section which time has already been called. That has happened. Looking ahead in a test, that has happened. Looking at another person's tests or answers, that has not happened because they are really 3 feet away, at least 3 feet away from each other. So that should not happen. So remember, one of the things you got to make sure in your room report is that the students are at least 3 feet away from each other. So remember, when you completed this form, the shoulder to shoulder, and we're doing level seating here. So they show the shoulders at least 3 feet, head to head is at least 3 feet for single level. All right. So that we've never had an issue with. Given or receiving assistance by any means, discussing or sharing test questions, answers, or test form identification numbers at any time, including test administration during breaks or after the test. Now, this is important. So students should, even after the test is given, a day before, a day after, 2 days after, they cannot go and discuss any test items with each other. They cannot post it on social media. Attempting to photograph, copy, or memorize test-related information or remove test materials, including questions or answers, from the test room in any way or at any time. Disclosing test questions or answers in any way or at any time, including through social media, in whole or in part. Using a prohibited calculator. So remember, all of you were given the calculated guidelines. So it's very important that as you're monitoring, you make sure that the calculator students are using is an approved calculator. Almost all schools in our district, though, will provide students with a school calculator. Using a calculator on any test section other than math. So, for example, science. Students should not have a calculator on their desk for science or any other test. So once the math test is done, the calculator should not be available, should not be seen at all. Using a watch with recording, internet communication, or calculated capabilities, a smartwatch or fitness band. Remember, students should not be entering the room at all with a watch, with a cell phone, a smartwatch, or anything of that nature. Accessing, now that has been an issue sometimes. Sometimes a cell phone will go off, so that's prohibited behavior. Keep that in mind. Accessing any electronic device other than an approved calculator or watch. Now the watch they're talking about is just a regular old-time watch where it's not a smartwatch. All other electronic devices, including cell phones and other wearable devices, must be powered off. Now, this is ACT. In EBR, they must not have it inside the room. It must not be on them at all. And stored out of sight from the time you are admitted to the test until you leave the test center, using a highlighter, pens, colored pens or pencils, notes, dictionaries, or other aids. So again, they cannot bring a highlighter, the colored pens, pencils, colored pen or pencils, notes, or any other aids. Now, for the EL learners, if it's authorized, they can have a bilingual dictionary. But all other students, no dictionaries. And when I mention bilingual dictionary, I'm talking about word to word, no definitions at all. Using scratch paper, they cannot use scratch paper at all unless it is an online test. So if you are taking the ACT online test, some use of ACT provided scratch paper or an ACT provided whiteboard may be permitted. So for the few students that are taking online, there was blue paper that was given that is to be used on the test for the online. But all on paper tests, no scratch paper. Not following instructions or abiding by the rules of the test center, exhibiting confrontational, threatening, or unruly behavior, violating any laws. If ACT suspects you have engaged in criminal activities in connection with a test, such activities may be reported to law enforcement agencies. Allow an alarm on a personal item to sound in the test room or creating any other disturbance. All right. ACT may restrict the items you bring to the test center. All items you bring into the test center, such as hats, glasses, purses, backpacks, cell phones, calculators, other electronic devices, pre-approved medications, or personal items and watches, may be searched at the discretion of ACT and testing staff. Searches may include the use of tools such as handheld metal detectors that detect prohibited items. ACT may confiscate and retain for a reasonable period any item suspected of having been used, even a cell phone, are capable of being used in violation of these terms and conditions. ACT may also provide such items to and permit searches of such items by third parties in connection with an investigation conducted by ACT or others. Neither ACT nor testing staff shall be responsible for loss or damage to any items that you bring to a test center. Your test center may also have additional procedures in which you must comply. Okay, so now if you notice a prohibited behavior, and again, this one here is one that usually occurs, because remember, one of the things you have to do on your room report, remember, one of the things you have to do in the room report is fill this part out right here. So at the end of each test, beginning of the next test, the first minute or so, you need to walk around and for each of the sections. So let's say after test 1, you are to estimate how many ovals have been left unbubbled, have not been bubbled. And then you're supposed to put that number here. So if you kind of estimate that there are about 5 of these that have not been bubbled, you put a 5 here. You put 5 here for test 1. This is test 2, this is test 3, this is test 4 for each student. And so at the end of, let's say at some point you're walking around again and you notice that all these bubbles have been bubbled in. It means that during one of these tests, the students went back and worked on a test. So that is prohibitive behavior. So that student's test will be voided, and that student will not be able to do the makeup. Okay, so now next thing I want to do is look at this part here. Go in the accommodations manual. We can go to the next page. All right. As a room supervisor, proctor, if you are certain prohibited behavior occurred, promptly dismiss the examinee. But if you only suspect behavior, if you are not certain, if you just kind of suspect prohibited behavior, take these steps. Letter A, discreetly warn the examinee that he or she is suspected of prohibited behavior. Continue close observation. After one warning, if you continue to suspect prohibited behavior, promptly dismiss the examinee. All right, now it is important though that you have a conversation with the test coordinator if you do suspect something. If you're certain that prohibited behavior occurred, you're going to promptly dismiss the examinee. If at all possible, have the test coordinator talk to the test coordinator and, if possible, do this together because the test coordinator needs to be aware of all of this. Note, the behavior does not need to be verified by the test coordinator. So if you see it and the test coordinator did not see it, then that is prohibited behavior. The student is dismissed. Or another staff member dismissed based on your own observation. You do not need to directly observe prohibited behavior to determine that it occurred. For example, if you are certain that ovals left unfilled at the end of a test were filled in after time has been called, dismiss the examinee. That was the reason for this right here that we talked about. So if you notice that all these 5 have been filled in, then dismiss the examinee. You do not have to see them actually filling it in. Do not schedule examinees dismissed for prohibited behavior for makeup testing. In other words, so just as we mentioned earlier, they cannot do a makeup. The decision to cancel scores due to prohibited behavior is at ACT's sole discretion and cannot be reversed or appealed. All right, now, if you're going to dismiss for prohibited behavior, and there's a chance that you will, if you dismiss an examinee for prohibited behavior, follow these procedures exactly. Number 1, take action immediately without creating a disturbance. If you cannot, wait until the end of the current timed test. 2, collect the examinee's test materials. 3, if you believe an electronic device or other item was used to store or exchange information or to take an image of the test, collect the device item from the examinee and call ACT immediately. So have your test coordinator call ACT immediately. ACT will determine if the device item is to be retained and sent to ACT or returned to the examinee. So it is important, and sometimes it happens, but it's important that no student or an employee. So if you're if you're a room supervisor or proctor, you cannot have a cell phone either. No one in the room should have a cell phone. So it's important that all cell phones be removed prior to entering the test room. Do not return the device item to the examinee without ACT approval. Number 4, tell the examinee you observed or are certain of prohibited behavior. The dismissal is because of the behavior. The test will not be scored. 5, you're going to write void on page 1 of the answer document. So on the answer document, and I would, if you're a room supervisor, I got to get this thing straightened out. If your room supervisor, if your test coordinator is available on page 1 of the answer document, this is page 1, you write void across. All right, void. And use as much as possible, use a pen. Do not use a pencil, but use a pen. So you write void, V-O-I-D, across. Okay, now, so you're going to write void on page 1 of the answer document. Do so in the examinee's presence, if possible. All right, in the examinee's presence. Dismiss the examinee. Number 7, submit a detailed irregularity report that includes. All right, now let's talk about that. So let's suppose that Jane Doe continued to mark item ovals after time was called. So you call time, and the student was still filling in ovals. All right, now remember, that's prohibited behavior. Once time is called, they have to stop. Pencils have to be put down. All right, so then you got to make sure, and remember, as before, you got to make sure that all this information is filled out. All this information is filled out. Don't leave anything unfilled. You put the student's name. Remember, you got to put the test booklet form and the serial number. the time the irregularity occurred, and the test. So this was test 1, let's say. So you're going to mark here where it says marking ovals after time. So you're going to mark that. Examinee schedule for makeup, you're going to say no. Now, it is important that, and remember, this can be voided, so you got to say examinee was informed. You must inform the examinee. Okay? All right, now that was a mistake here. That's nothing right here. All right, so you're going to say student continued to mark ovals after time was called. All right? And then only, now since this is going to be a voided answer document, voided test, this has to be attached to the answer document. So your test coordinator is going to bring it back to me, and this will be attached to it, to that student's answer document with the word void across. So only do one per irregularity report. So do only one of these. So if it's a void, you're just going to fill out one of these. All right, because it has to be attached to the student's voided answer document. All right, now, okay, so that's an example of what you would do here. So let's look at this. So you're going to indicate the time, the incident, and the name of the examinee. So that was this right here. Time of the incident, the name of the examinee, the test the examinee was working on at the time. So right here. The test room and seating location of the examinee. So the test room would be here. There's seating location. It doesn't say anything about seating location on here, but they can use the room report to do that. Let's see, and seating locations of the examinee, the details of what you observed. So that will be this right here, the details of what you observed. The statements you and the examinee made and the actions that were taken. I guess right here you would say something like, I told the examinee or student what I saw, and then you explain what you saw, and was dismissed. All right, because it does say something like this: the statements you and the examinees made and the actions that were taken. The names of the staff who observed and are certain of the irregularity. So, you since you're the one that observed it, then you would put here. So, I would put your name. So if the room supervisor is, let's say Michael Doe, then you would say Michael Doe saw the prohibited behavior. All right, so there's not much room here. Just do the best you can with writing all of this. But it does say submit a detailed irregularity report that contains all of this. So it's very important that you abide to this, because remember, it says at ACT's discretion. So if there's not enough information, they may come back and ask for more. So keep that in mind. All right, so number 8, you're going to attach the voided answer document to the irregularity report. Do not staple, and return it in a processing envelope. So your test coordinator is going to do that. And then test coordinator is going to bring everything to me, and then we're going to put this in the envelope. Okay. ACT will not score the test if you follow these procedures exactly. You must inform the examinee the test will not be scored, and clearly indicate this on the irregularity report. Otherwise, tests may be scored. So that's what it's stating. Note, all prohibited behaviors will be reported to the state or district. Okay, now let's look at some other examples that were submitted. So this was an example that was submitted by a school. So the school did this. So it says student marked answers after verifying tests were incomplete. Now notice that there's some information not left off. Some information left off here. For example, the test coordinator would need to go back and complete this information, and it would have to get that from you. This would have to be figured out. So before you give all this back to the test coordinator, you got to make sure that all this is complete. And then there should be more detail here. So more detail. And the more detail should be based on this right here, what they're asking for. Okay, so got to make sure that you do as much as this. You give as much detail as possible. Um, Another example would be this one. So one school gave this. So they have it looks like they have the serial number, but they don't have the book form number. And then it just says during test 3, they marked ovals after time, and they have all this completed. But then they say student continued to bubble in answers after time was called on section 3. All right. So that's all they wrote. You really should put more detail on here. Who observed it? What conversation did you have with the student? Because it is asking. You notice they do have one of these things listed here where the statements you and the examinee made and the actions that were taken. Another example, if I can find one, would be this. Okay, so this one here, so we have the test booklet number, the time it occurred, the test. It says marking ovals after time, and makeup testing, no. Examinee was informed. But it says this, time had been called, students were told to stop work and put pencils down. Student did not put pencil down and kept bubbling answers with me standing in front of him. So it is possible that some students, even when you are right by the student, is still going to bubble in. That is just vagrant disrespect for anything. So anyway, I'm not even going to go there. So it's prohibited behavior. You it's just okay. So you just write as much detail as possible. Okay, now let's talk about this. Okay, so we had just talked about prohibited behavior. So remember, for any prohibited behavior, for all these prohibited behaviors, the student should be dismissed, and you were told the procedure to do that. So all this is on this part here, dismiss for prohibited behavior, and there was a discussion on what to do with the voided answer documents. Okay, now what I want to do now very quickly is go to this part here. So in both the accommodations and the standard time, I want you to locate the part. It's still in the irregularity section that says attempts to copy test materials. So examples would be taking pictures of test items or materials, removing pages from the test booklet, taking notes about tests, handwritten or through electronic means such as cell phones or calculators, scanning or making copies of test materials. We have never in EBR had this, but just in case it happens, but we've never had this, but just in case it happens, then this is what you would do. Do not allow staff or examinees to duplicate or record any part of the test by copying, taking notes, photographing, scanning, or using any other means. Ensure all secure materials are collected and returned. Room supervisors must collect all materials from examinees before they are dismissed. Room supervisors must return all materials to the test coordinator immediately after testing. The test coordinator must pack and return materials to ACT following testing. So they would bring it to accountability, to the accountability office. If you observe an examinee attempting to copy test materials, use a photographic recording or scanning device, or remove test items, dismiss them for prohibitive behavior. Again, we've never had this, but if it happens, you will confiscate and clear any device used in an attempt to copy materials. Now, what I would do is also have this discussion with the test coordinator, because the principal would need to be notified. Inform the examinee the test will not be scored. Void the answer document. Note all details on the irregularity report. If you've got to attach another sheet, attach another sheet. Call ACT immediately to determine if additional action is needed. You and the test coordinator or the test coordinator will need to call ACT immediately and then call our office. So accountability needs to be notified. Okay, now let's talk about unauthorized marking of responses in the test booklet. Okay, unauthorized. So there are situations where the student and the test coordinator have made arrangements to transfer answers to the answer document. A student could have had their arm broken the day before or something like that nature. All right, but if it's an unauthorized marking of the responses, let's talk about that. Okay, examples. Examinee marked all responses in the test booklet without authorization for them to do so. Examinee started marking responses in the test booklet and then switched to the answer document. Examinee made note of some response in the test booklet and forgot to transfer them to the answer document. This is why it's important that as room supervisors and proctors, you're constantly walking around. You need to check to see if students are actually bubbling in their answers. Okay, so if you notice halfway through the test that nothing's been bubbled, that they've been circling their answers in the test booklet, you need to inform them to quickly go and bubble their answers before time is called, because once time is called, they will not be able to complete this. This is unauthorized. All right, so note this irregularity does not require examinee dismissal. All right, so it's not prohibited behavior, it's just an irregularity. So remember, students were bubbling in. Students were writing answers circling the answers in the test booklet. They just forgot to do this. All right, that will be an irregularity, and then there's a discussion about what to do. If the examinee was not authorized by the test coordinator to mark answers in the test booklet, take action as soon as possible to remedy the issue. If the examinee is finished and time remains on the current test, instruct the examinee to immediately transfer responses from the test booklet to the answer document. Remember, time remaining, there's still time in this test. If time has already been called on the current test, no answers can be transferred at any time, including during the break or after testing. That student is going to get basically, if nothing's there, that student's going to get a 0 in that section. So it's important that room supervisors are constantly walking around and monitoring what's occurring. Number 2, instruct the examinee to continue testing by marking responses on the answer document for any remaining test. Note the details of the marking error on the irregularity report. So yes, you do have to fill in the irregularity report, and you do have to you do have to make the details on it. So you do have to complete the irregularity report in as much details as possible. This occurred maybe once, so that should not occur, but it did happen once before, where a student just was just marking answers in the booklet and never transferred. That happens, but in our case, it just happened once. So hopefully, it won't happen in your situation. 4, determine what to do with the answer document. Okay, now letter A. If there are some responses marked on the answer document, submit the answer document for scoring. 2, if there are no responses marked on the answer document, attach the answer document to the irregularity report. So there are no responses marked on the answer document. So if it's blank, attach the document to the irregularity report. C, if the examiner is going to retest on the makeup day, write replaced across the answer document and attach it to the irregularity report. Okay, so If a student, for some reason, you found on test 1, and time is called and there's nothing there, student wrote the circle the answer in the test booklet, then yes, the student can do the makeup. The student can do the makeup. You would write the word replaced on the answer document, and you attach the irregularity report to this. Now, this happened once before. So to avoid that, though, because you really don't want to have the student do a makeup if they're sitting for this test. So to avoid that, it's important that you constantly walk around. But if you notice that halfway in the test the student hadn't done anything here, just tell the student to just bubble in and continue working, because you do want this completed. All right, but if there's nothing there, then you can have the student do the makeup. Talk to the test coordinator. You need to talk to the test coordinator. Remember, you're going to have to write the word replaced, and then submit an irregularity report with it. If the examinee is going to retest on makeup day, write replaced across the answer document and attach it to the irregularity report. Keep the irregularity report and answer document. Schedule the examinee for another non-test session. Now, this is going to be the test coordinator who's going to do this. Schedule the examinee for another non-test session during which the examinee can transfer the non-test items from the used answer document to a new one. Okay. 5, determine if the examinee needs to be rescheduled for makeup testing. All right, so that's going to be the test coordinator that will determine that. But if there's nothing there, and the student just, and this is really in test 1 that sometimes this will occur. Student just because if you notice on test 1, then and you make that, tell the student to continue working, then they're not going to make that mistake on the others. But just make sure that if this is blank, then I would just go ahead and let that student do the makeup, because it's not helping the student at all. If you turned in for scoring, this is going to be a 0. So if there's nothing there, let's just have the student do the makeup. All right, but remember that's going to be the test coordinator that's going to have to sit with the student to make sure that all this information is transferred to the new answer document. No answers can be transferred. Only the non-test portion is transferred to the new answer document. Okay, let's talk about this one now. Marking responses in a future section of the answer document. Now, this occurred once before. In almost all cases, it doesn't occur, but it occurred once before in EBR. So, examples. Examinee marked test 2 responses in the section for test 3. So, the student wasn't very careful. So, they're working on test 2 and they were just bubbling on in test 3. Now, at some point, they would have realized something was amiss here, because there's only 40 questions and there are 60 here. But the issue could also occur in test 4, because the same number of questions in each one. But that's why it's important that you're walking around, because if they're on test 2 and they're doing answers on test 3, then they need to quickly fix this. All right, so here's what you do. Okay, so now notice that this irregularity does not require examinee dismissal. Now let's go to the next page. All right, so if you notice, remember this happened once before, where an examinee is on test 2, let's say, and they were putting answers on test 3. All right, now at the end of the current test, give the examinee a new answer document and collect the first answer document. All right, so give the examinee a new answer document and collect a first answer document. So all test coordinators ordered extra answer documents, so the next one should not be an issue. So there should be an available answer document. 2, instruct the examinees to begin marking responses in the correct section of the new answer document. 3, After testing is completed, supervise the examinee in the transfer of the non-test information and all previous test responses from the first answer document to the correct sections on the new answer document. So for example, so you gave the student a new answer document. So after the test, you're going to, in the student's presence, you're going to watch the student transfer all of this to the new answer document. And if they were working on, let's say, test 2, then test 1, you're going to watch them transfer all these answers to the new answer document. Okay, so after testing is completed, supervise the examinee in the transfer of the non-test information and all previous test responses from the first answer document to the correct sections of the new answer document. Examinee must not have access to the test booklet. Cannot have the test booklet, because all they're doing is just transferring, all the student is doing is just transferring whatever answers was previously marked to the new answer document. That's all they're doing. Mark the first answer document replaced. So if this was the bad answer document, you're going to write the word replaced across. Write the word replaced. And attach it to the irregular report. So yes, you have to do an irregularity report. So note the details on the marking of the marking error on the report. So put as much detail as possible. And return the new answer document for scoring. All right, marking responses in a previous section of the answer document. In other words, working on a test other than the current test. So that's where they go back. So remember, that's prohibited behavior. So examinee marked responses on the section for test 2 during test 3. They went back and did some stuff. Dismiss the examinee. This is prohibited behavior. Write void the answer document and inform the examinee the test will not be scored. Okay, so there's some information on irrational behavior. We've never had students on test day in the test room that have their behavior was irrational. So examples though would be examinee yells or disrupt the test room, examinee becomes violent, examinee places self or others in danger. We've never had that, but if it happens, number 1, try to prevent other examinees from being interrupted, affected, or involved. Number 2, handle the behavior as quietly as possible without physical force or contact. 3, if necessary, call security police to protect staff and other examinees' safety. 4, collect and return the disruptive examinee's test materials. 5, dismiss the examinee and inform him or her the test will not be scored. Void the answer document. 6, note the details of the irregularity and attach the examinee's test materials to the report. We've never had this, refusal to turn in materials. We've never had that. But in the event it does, here's an example. Examinee will not allow the room supervisor to collect his or her test materials. Number 1, warn the examinee that the police will be contacted and this action may result in fines and imprisonment. 2, call ACT immediately, providing the examinee's name and test form serial number from the seating diagram. 3, do not place yourself in a position of physical danger, and do not leave other test materials or examinees unattended. All right, now, in the case of irrational behavior and even refusal to turn in materials, you need to get the test coordinator involved. They need to be informed so they can discuss this with the principal and see what actions the school may have in this response. But note in both cases, we do need to call ACT about this. Okay, so that was the end of this part in terms of disruptive behavior and other irregularities that may occur. But again, it is your responsibility as room supervisors and proctors to read this section as closely as possible. You need to make sure you understand every aspect of this, and if you have any questions, you need to contact your test coordinator. Okay, this is going to conclude this part of irregularities.